Ladies and gentlemen, family and friends, scholars and dignitaries, welcome to another episode. Welcome to my world. So, I love a good joke. To me, humor, laughter is the spice of life, and it makes this journey of life a little less stressful and a little bit more fun and enjoyable along the way. So, I love good comedy. It all started when we were kids and my cousin came up to me and said, "Hey, someone said that you sound like an owl." And I said, "Who?" And he started laughing. And I said, "Who?" And he laughed even harder. So I thought, I'm going to try that on my wife. I told her that someone said that she sounds like an owl. And she said, "What?" And I just looked at her. Then I said, "No, it's true. Someone said you sound like an owl." And she looked at me and said, "When?" And I just looked at her in shock. So I said, "Just a few minutes ago. It doesn't matter. Listen." And I said again, slowly, someone said that you sound like an owl." And she said, "What's their name?" And I said, "That's a good question. Could you rephrase it?" And she said, "The person that said that to you, what is that person's name?" And then I just lost it and I blurted out, "You're supposed to say who?" And she said, "Now who sounds like an owl?"
I don't get it.
It was told so well.
Anyway, here are 5 of my favorite jokes. This story is about a man and his wife sitting having breakfast. They were a very nice couple, and the wife, Margaret, said to her husband, John, "If I were to die, would you get married again?" And John said, "Well, that's the darndest thing. Here we are on a beautiful morning and having a nice breakfast together, and you bring up this terrible thing about death. And it's just terrible, and I'm not going to talk to you about it." He said, "That's just a terrible thing to do, so forget about it. Just forget about it." But she didn't forget about it, and she brought up the same thing again that night. And he wouldn't talk to her about it. And she kept bringing it up for days. "If I would die, would you get married again?" And finally, one night when she asked again, he gave up and said, "Yes, I would. Now, does that settle it?" And she said, "Would you sell the house?" And he said, "No, I wouldn't sell the house. It's a perfectly good house, and I don't see any reason to sell it." And she said, "Would you sell our bed?" And he said, "No, it's a perfectly good bed, and I don't see any reason to sell it." And she said, "Well, you certainly wouldn't let her touch my golf clubs." And he said, No, she's left-handed." Yesterday, I was at the pet store buying a large bag of Purina dog chow for my dog Fido. I call him Fido the Wonder Dog. And I was in the checkout line when a woman behind me asked if I had a dog. Well, I shouldn't have said it, but I looked at her and on impulse I said, "No, I don't have a dog. I was starting the Purina dog food diet again." I added that I probably shouldn't because I ended up in the hospital the last time, but that I'd lost 20 pounds before I woke up in the intensive care ward with tubes coming out of most of my orifices and IVs in both arms. I told her that it was essentially a perfect diet, and the way that it works is you load your pants pockets with Purina nuggets and simply eat 1 or 2 every time you feel hungry. The food is nutritionally sound, so it works well, and I was going to try it again. Now, I have to mention here that practically everybody in line was now watching us and listening to my story intently. And she was horrified. And she asked if I ended up in intensive care because the dog food poisoned me. And I told her no. I stopped to pee on a fire hydrant and a car hit me. A 65-year-old woman went to the emergency room and was seen by a new young doctor. After the doctor examined her, the doctor informed her that she was pregnant. The woman screamed the loudest scream anyone ever heard and then went running out of the exam room up the hall until she was stopped by an older doctor. The doctor calmed her down and asked what happened. She said, "That other doctor just informed me I was pregnant." So the doctor told her to sit down and relax and that she wasn't pregnant. So he went up the hall to see the other doctor. He told him that this woman was 65 years old, that she already had 5 children who were grown and now adults, and she hadn't had any sex in a year and couldn't possibly be pregnant. Without looking up, the doctor said, "Does she still have the hiccups?" So, an older married couple were in the supermarket, and the wife was a kleptomaniac and she stole a can of peaches. So, she was arrested, and they went before the town justice who knew her. And he said, Sarah, you know this is wrong. What did you steal? And she said, a can of peaches. And the judge said, how many peaches were in the can? And she said, probably 5. And the judge said, okay, then you are sentenced to 5 nights in the county jail. And then her husband jumped up and said, Your Honor. And the judge looked and said, Yes. And the husband said, She also stole a can of peas.
No? Macareno. No? Huh, okay.
Now, caution. This last joke is so funny you can die laughing. Hey, it can happen, but that's not why I tell it to my wife over and over. So just let the police try to prove it. So, 3 old men are sitting on a park bench talking about their problems. The first man says, Oh my gosh, I get up every morning at 7 o'clock and go to the bathroom to pee. And I stand there and I push and I squeeze, but nothing comes out. Maybe a dribble if I'm lucky. It's terrible. The second man says, Yes, I know what you mean. So they said, Well, what's your problem? And so he says, Every morning I get up at 8 o'clock and I go to the bathroom to move my bowels. I push, I squeeze, I grunt, I groan, and maybe I go raisins if I'm lucky. It's terrible. The third man says, Yes, I know what you mean, being old. It's just awful. And they asked, Well, what's your problem? And he said, Well, every morning at 7 o'clock, I pee like a golden fountain. And then every morning at 8 o'clock, I have a nice bowel movement, nice juicy plums. So the other said, What's wrong with that? And he said, I don't get out of bed until 9. So there you go, 5 of my favorite jokes, and there are more for another day. Hey, be safe, be well, laugh, and God bless.